Again, my name is Antonio Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Investments for the Building Service 32BJ pension funds. They are the pension funds, health insurance, training, and legal funds for 175,000 members who work in buildings across New York City every day. So they're the janitors, they are the doormen, they are the cleaners, the window washers. And it's really a pleasure to be here today to interface with a bunch of folks who care really deeply and are engaged in the issues that my membership cares about. And so to give you a little bit of background about myself, I started my career actually as an organizer and researcher at a labor union. And the best part about working at a labor union as a young person is that you get to do a little bit of everything. And so one day you're putting on a suit and negotiating with hospital CEOs on packages for your members, and the next day you have a bullhorn in front of a march. The next day at 2 o'clock you're hanging a banner off the freeway with the mask on, trying to avoid the cops. I think you're wondering, why is that car there? Why is there this is a 2010 Inferno Orange, that's the actual name, Inferno Orange Chevy Camaro. And this reminds me of the time I was down with a colleague in South Texas. This is the last car left in that San Antonio Enterprise Rent-A-Car Airport. We were going down to South Texas to organize workers on the border. And me, Antonio Rodriguez, and my colleague from Pakistan. And as you can probably imagine, we got pulled over by Border Patrol and at the side of the road and spent about 45 minutes answering a bunch of questions. And I think it was that experience that ultimately made me think maybe I should give this investing thing a try. But in reality, if your boss knows that you can read a balance sheet and you read an income statement, more and more you're going to start focusing on those sort of things. And as my career progressed, I moved more and more into pension management and investment management as a whole. But the through line in my career was always the same, right? Kind of working with and working for the savings and interest of working class people. And so when I asked that question kind of at the beginning on, who do you serve? And that's the title of my talk, who do you serve? I'm asking it of myself, but I'm asking it of all of you as well. And, I'm really excited to be here because so many of you are working on those very issues, on climate change, on inclusive infrastructure, on affordable housing. Again, things that our membership cares very deeply about. But, I'm a big picture person. And the thing about progress is that progress that's not inclusive is not really progress, at least in our book. The results of progress without inclusion are that the richest 1% live 15 years longer than the poorest 1% in this country, right? And that's 15 years for men and 10 years for women, right? So think about the gap between the richest and the poorest. That's 10 to 15 years of additional life if you're rich or if you're poor. This is what the results of progress without inclusion looks like. The top 10 wealth share has gone up continuously since the 1980s, and the bottom 50% wealth share is flat. So progress has to be inclusive in order for it to be real progress. So us at the 32BJ funds, we want to be part of the solution, right? We want to be part of the solution, but we have a lot of challenges, and it's funny hearing the conversation around 401ks and all the regulation, and I think we have a lot of challenges being invested in firms like you all, funds like you all run. And there's a few that I think are really, really important to discuss. The first is access and voice, that money buys access, but not always inclusion. So I'll give you one story about a firm that was pitching us an investment. It was in private debt to our funds. And it was a good investment. And from a pure fiduciary standpoint, it'd been fine to invest in. But at the very same time, this investment manager was buying up buildings that employed our members and trying to withdraw from the very pension fund that they wanted our members to invest their money with. Yeah, I know. And furthermore, they supported a brief at the Supreme Court that would make it easier for all employers to get out of the very fund they wanted to invest in their products. And our members had a hard time, our union had a hard time getting any traction with these conversations. But when the investment manager figured out that maybe their bonus wouldn't be a high because they couldn't pitch to funds like ours, suddenly we got a conversation with a C-suite executive about our relationship. In this society, all interests ultimately end up becoming economic interests, right? And so my fiduciary duty can't just encompass the short-term risk and return. It has to encompass everything that my members care about. There's also a ton of structural frictional problems, right? Again, we heard this earlier. We oftentimes get asked, why do you invest so conservatively at our fund, right? These are things that your union talks about, the members care about. Why do you invest so conservatively? And I always tell folks we are pushed into those type of investments because in order for something to get to our desk or trustees, it has to go through a number of regulators, lawyers, investment gatekeepers, consultants. By the time something gets to us, it ends up being the most conservative and structurally conservative option. And so that is a challenge that we're continuously facing. And the third is the political economy, because capital cannot ignore the system in which it invests. So I'll say this, like the statistics I showed earlier, those are all statistics that are embedded in our political economy, right? Whether it's, again, life expectancy or climate change or affordable housing. We try and get our members engaged on these particular issues, but and I'll give you an example. Our largest industry currently that's growing is security. So security guards are currently the fastest growing sector for our union. And the problem with being a security guard in New York City or in Washington, D.C. or Baltimore, where we have our members, is not that they can't save for retirement, which is true. It's very hard for them to save for retirement. And it's not that they have lesser access to healthcare, although that's true as well. The problem is they don't make enough money, right? They don't make enough money. And so, and wages have not kept up with productivity. Wages have not kept up with cost of living. And so the issues around our kind of overall political economy system are important for us to build that coalition that can advance the issues that we've talked about today. But it's not all bad news. Not all bad news. I do think there are ways for us to continue to engage on these particular issues and pathways forward for us at the labor funds. The first is to embed worker voice. That governance has representation and participation for the people we purport to speak for. Give you another kind of example. I was asked to speak at a conference, the Well Building Conference. It's a conference that purports to make people first real estate and design around communities and organizations. And I was asked to talk about our real assets portfolio. And I was surprised to see that there was not a single representative from any employees at this particular event. The folks who maintain the buildings, again, who keep the buildings secure, were not in any of these conversations. And so if they're not, then it's my job. Somebody said earlier, money talks, right? That then it's our job at the funds to make sure that our members' voice is heard. Second, we need to align capital with impact and use that dual lens. So one of the inspiring things about working at the 32BJ funds is that our I think we're one of the most sophisticated purchasers of healthcare in the country. Just recently had our conference with Mark Cuban as the lead speaker. The 32BJ Funds is going to be the first labor fund to have direct contracting with all its hospitals. Through participant data, through keen kind of understanding of contracting, we've been able to keep healthcare costs at half of the national average for our fund. Now we have a nearly $3 billion corpus that we would like to align with the work of our health benefits team. And that means investing with organizations, healthcare startups that are doing this innovative work. And finally, we need to measure inclusion and fairness because, again, returns plus inclusion in our minds means progress. And so one of the things that we need to do, we are, as an investors, we are relative investors, right? We're constantly looking at trade-offs between asset classes, between managers, between markets. And, I think the thing we need is how can we include progress in affordability and things like that into our portfolio dashboards. It has to speak the same language that our consultants, that our trustees, that our lawyers are speaking in order for it to be actionable. And there are a few firms that are doing that good work. I will shout out one. They're called the Investment Integration Project, and their systems level investing dashboards, which is trying to integrate all of those concerns, make it as quantitative as possible. It'll never be completely, but so we can integrate it in the same way we talk about Sharpe ratios, risk and return, and we talk about drawdown. We can talk about these issues in a way that integrates the portfolio so we can do a true trade-off of the actual economic impact. So I'll close with this because I think it's incredibly important. Progress without inclusion is not progress. We have to understand who we serve when we think about economic impact as a whole. I know who I serve. I serve the building service workers, their families, their want for a dignified retirement. and ultimately, I hope that you all can join me with me. So thank you.